Welcome to the Elikus podcast and a very happy Hanukkah to everyone. This is class number 24 in the discourse Naso Rosh 5672. This is the fourth discourse in the great book B'Shah Ekdimu, but this is class number 24, and this is the third class in chapter 16. And it's just so apropos for Hanukkah, because Hanukkah is when we uncover the flask of oil that was only able to burn for one day, burned for 8 days. We know oil represents wisdom, the wisdom of the Torah, but this was a flask that was sealed with the seal of the high priest, indicating the deepest, highest Torah. And this is what we're sharing over here on the Likus podcast. The deepest teachings of Torah revealed to open up the doors for Mashiach, the ultimate revelation, the essence of essence that we're learning over here. So here we are. We're in the middle of chapter 16, and we're ready to go. In our last class, we were talking about the idea that the origins of the oros, the origins of the lights, originate in the Or Ein Sof, in what's called Eses Spheres Agnuzais, in the 10 hidden spheres, attributes that are hidden in the Or Ein Sof. Because we've been exploring in this chapter, remember, let's always keep the thread going. The thread works like this. In this chapter, he was explaining that the oir of the spheros, the lights of all the attributes, those lights are not really completely, in the full sense of the word, infinite. They do have a slight slant, so that, of course, we wouldn't notice them. The lights seem to be abstract. The lights seem to be equal in all the spheres, but in a very, very hidden way, the lights are already leaning each one to a particular form and a particular expression, so that later when they will go into their matching vessel, the vessel will then particularize and limit the light in accordance to the vessel. So this is according to the Shita of the Arizal, that says that the lights are mitziyarim. The lights are not completely Ein Sof and Pashut with the utmost pshitos. The origins of the lights, we said, come from the Kav. The Kav then comes out according to that. The Kav, although it's a Kav of Ein Sof, of Or Ein Sof, it's a thread of Or Ein Sof, but it has the potential for 10 sphirot. It's a simple light. It includes all 10 spheres in it, but it will manifest as 10 spheres. You'll see in all the worlds that the Kav is producing, the 10 spheres will always come out, because the light is already narrowed down to 10 spheres. Now take the Kav, and let's trace the Kav backwards. Where do we go? To the Or Ein Sof. In the Or Ein Sof, we also find a source for the Kav, because the Kav comes from the Malchus of the Or Ein Sof. So first of all, you're speaking already of spheros in the Or Ein Sof. How can we speak of spherot? How can we speak of attributes? The answer is, we discussed that's referring to the 10 spheres hagenuzais, the 10 hidden spheres that are in the Or Ein Sof, which is the nether part of the Or Ein Sof, which is related to what we discussed earlier as the light that Hashem is shining in Himself. It's completely in Himself, because before the Tzimtzum, there isn't even a place for the worlds to exist. There's no black hole yet. There's no space for the creations even to exist. But the intention over here is an illumination that is for the sake of illuminating the worlds. And since there is already intention for the worlds, that's already narrowing the infinity and boundlessness of the light to become more focused into some kind of a structure. So of course you can't find 10 spheres over there. It's hidden, but yet it's there. As opposed to the higher element of the Or Ein Sof, where the light is utterly pure, utterly infinite, and therefore there's no spheres there at all. That's the light that Hashem is shining for Himself. So we spoke, now what came out, this was all leading up in chapter 12, 13, 13, 14, and 15. I think the first chapter was 12 in this Maamor, yeah. So it's a long discourse, Naso Rosh. So we're all talking about the Oirais, developing this idea. And then comes out that what we're saying is that in the Or Ein Sof there is already a shoresh, a root for the worlds. And the words that he uses, even though it's Or Ein Sof, it's already a slight source for the gvul, for the limitation. So therefore we learned in this chapter that he's trying to differentiate and say, but don't mistake this with the source in the Ein Sof, that's the root of the Kalim. The root of the vessels, that's the real source of gvul, of limitation. That's vessels. We're not talking about the source of vessels. The source of vessels is a much more limited element in the Ein Sof. And that's we attributed that to the concept called Rishimu. Rishimu is the source of the Kalim. Here, the Esses Spheres Agnuzais is the source of the Ur. And he wants us to understand very clearly that the Ur and the source of the Ur and the source of the Kalim, which in a sense can both be considered Gvul, limitation, but yet you can't compare the limitation of the vessels to the limitations of the light. Because the light is only called limited compared to the Or Ein Sof itself, as it is for itself, but not compared to the vessels. Compared to the vessels, even the lights are called limitless Ein Sof. And in order to crystallize that, in the last class we learned that the difference between the Kalim and the Or, to give it a very clear distinction, is that the names of God that we attributed to these forces. When it comes to the Kalim, to the vessels, and even to the godliness that's in the vessels, that creates the vessels, that brings about the vessels. And even when you trace this godliness all the way up to its source, before the Tzimtzum, the Rishimu that's still hidden in the Or Ein Sof, which is that we discussed earlier, is called the Koyach HaGvul, the power of Gvul that's in the Or Ein Sof. When we give it its name, what would be its name? Its name would be one of the 7 names of Hashem. Kel, Elokim, Shakai, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud. These are all the various 7 names of God. Those 7 names, we learned in last class, is like K'moy Koyach Nivdal. It's like a particular power it's a feature that the Or Ein Sof possesses. It doesn't identify with the Or Ein Sof himself. It's not a description on God himself. It's a description on a certain potential feature that he will be able to emanate. It's like we learned the last line, we learned in last class. It's like it's of the Or Ein Sof, but it's like a spark that separates from the fire. Koach Nivdal. So when you look at a spark that goes off from a fire, the spark, you ask, what is the substance of the spark? The fire. But yet, it's separated from the fire. And that's the concept of Kalim. Kalim will always appear, they're not in a state of dveikus. They're not in a state of attachment, they're a state of like a separation, like a separate power. However, Oyer has the opposite quality. The quality of Oyer is always dveikus. Oyer is, you can't have light that's not davuk b'ma'or. Light is always attached to its source. Light is opposite of a spark. A spark is the substance of the fire itself, but separated. Light, on the one hand, is less than the spark, because it's only a shine coming from the fire. It's only a light. But on the other hand, if you separate it from the source, there is no light. If you need a beam to connect it, it's always connected. So the lights are far more attached to the source and reflective of the source. Therefore, the lights are called Havaya. Remember, we learned that in the last class, we learned that the lights, the neshama that goes into the spheres, the oiros that go into the spheres, no matter which sphera, all the oiros remember he brought from the Siddur of the Alter Rebbe, that all the oiros that go into the spheres, they're always Shem Havaya. The differences between the spheres, that one is called Kael and the other one is called Elokim, that's the body of the sphera. But the neshama of the sphera is always Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's even when the oiros are in the Kalim. And of course, when the oiros, before they go into the Kalim, when they're inside the Kav, when they're just part of that simple Kav, which is a source of all 10 or all 10 lights, all in one simple light, of course it's called Havaya. And when you trace it all the way higher, all the way up to the Esses Sfiros Hagnuzos, it's also Havaya. So if it's Havaya, what did we learn? Havaya is not a name of God that represents a feature. Havaya is a name of Hashem himself. It's all names are God's names, but it's God as God is lowering himself down into a particular function. But Yud Kei Vav Kei is not in a particular function. It's he as he is. It's a description of him. As we learned at Shema Etzem, the name of the essence, like he brought Shmoi Ani Havaya Hu Shemi, Hashem says. Name Yud Kei Vav Kei is God's personal name. And as we learned earlier, the Radak, the Metzudas, they say, Shem HaMeyuchad Bi. It's the name that is unified with me. Okay, this is a summary of what we learned in the last class. So here we can see very clearly how the Koyach HaGvul, the power of Gvul, that is related to the vessels, that is related to the Rishimu, is far more Gvul and far more separated, so to speak, from the Shirish of the Oirais, which are so much more unified with the Orein Sof, and they are of the Orein Sof, and that's why they are called by the name of Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei. However, we learned that in Orein Sof itself, there is the nether part of the Orein Sof, which is the 10 Sfiros Hagnuzos. And again, in the Orein Sof itself, it's where Hashem is emanating light, which he's intending for it to be for the worlds. And then, even though it's much prior to the worlds, and then there's the Orein Sof, which is a Giloy La'atzmai, it's a revelation for himself, where there is no worlds at all. And there it's Mamish Peligvul, it's utterly limitless. So what's that name? Every revelation has a name. Atzmus doesn't have a name. The essence doesn't have a name. But every revelation has a name. What's that revelation? The answer is Havaya. That's Havaya. But older, didn't we say Havaya is the Esses Sfiros Hagnuzos? Are the 10 lowers are the 10 hidden spheroids that are in the Ein Sof? They're called Havaya. So which one is it? Is the 10 spheroids that are hidden in Havaya the nether part of Havaya, the nether part of the Orein Sof called Havaya, or is the Orein Sof itself that is infinitely that doesn't have any spheroids at all called Havaya? And the answer is Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun. That's why there's 2 times Yud Kei Vav Kei, Havaya Delayela and Havaya Delatata. See, now it's all coming together. The Mashiach classes that we're giving daily, for those that are following, will listen to the daily WhatsApp. We've been learning all about these various different levels of Havaya, and how you're getting now over here as well, that there's 2 names of Havaya in Hashem himself. The lower Havaya is the Oer, as it has already a shaykhs to the world, has a connection to the world. It's already a preparatory stage within the Orein Sof that is kind of preparing itself to produce worlds. It's still infinite and it's still unified with him, but it has already a slant of 10 spheres. And then the higher Havaya, and why am I saying there's 2 Havayas is because when God reveals to Moshe the 13 attributes of mercy, we say it in our prayers all the time, Hashem, Hashem. It mentions 2 times Yud Kei Vav Kei. And they are so far apart from the other that if you look, there is a line. If you look in the Siddur, you'll see there is a partition between them. You can't even equate them. The lower Havaya is so inferior compared to the superiority of the higher Havaya. And now we'll get it. Now we're learning about it in its shoresh of shroshim, in its root of roots. The Orein Sof itself, that's before the Tzimtzum. The 10 Sfiros Hagnuzos is the external part of it. That's the Havaya, the lower Havaya. That's the Havaya Habez, the second Havaya. And the first time it mentions the Tetragrammaton, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, Havaya is the Tetragrammaton. The Yud Kei Vav Kei, the first time is God for himself completely. The Or, as it is shining in its brilliant infinity and boundlessness, that's the first Havaya. Orein Sof Kishahu La'atzmo, the Orein Sof as it stands for itself. Gewalt. These are the 2 Havayas. So, and by the way, it says, I'm just going to have to throw this in because it's Chanukah, that the power of Chanukah is from Havaya D'Li'ela, from the higher Havaya. It says, V'Hashem Yagi Achashki. and Havaya will illuminate my darkness. Since it says and Havaya, it's referring to Havaya D'Liela. There's the higher Havaya that Chanukah is illuminating from the highest. That's why it can go into the darkest places and transform the darkness. But that's for another time. So now let's read inside. However, b'shem Havaya yesh gam kein beis madregas. In Shem Havaya itself, there's also two levels. Ukamoshe Kasel, like it says, Vayikra Havaya Havaya, that he called forth. Moshe called out Hashem Hashem. So the first Havaya is a higher Havaya. Of a Yedua, it is known. Dahainu, what are the two Havayas? Havaya the Seder Ishtalshalos. One is the Havaya of part of the evolution of worlds. The Havaya as it is already part of God evolving His energy to the creation. So of course, we're soon going to see, it's on a much, much lower level. We said earlier, the oirais of the 10 spherais, which are all the way down, 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 down in Atzilus, even though I feel so silly saying this, down, down, down in Atzilus. Atzilus is so holy that the Alter Rebbe he writes Aleph Tzadik Yud, he couldn't even finish saying the word Atzilus. It would tremble so much that he couldn't even say the word, he would say Atzi, because he couldn't say the word Atzilus, because he really, really experienced what means Atzilus. So he couldn't even say the word Atzilus out of his mouth. And we're talking over here, Atzilus is considered low because we're so much higher. That's the beauty of Chassidus, where it's taking us. It's taking us into Keser, higher than Keser, before the Tzimtzum, into the Orein Sof. I mean, no generations even dare to talk about this. And today it's on YouTube and on Spotify. I mean, this is crazy. This is Mashiach. This is awesome. But in any case, let's not get too carried away. So we said earlier that Havaya is the Or that runs through all the spheres. They're called Havaya. That's real Havaya de Beseder Ishtalshalos. That's called Havaya of Ishtalshalos, because that's already where Chachma produces Bina, Bina produces Das. One sphere comes after the next sphere. That's literally hands-on God's energy, the soul of the Sphirot, the Hashem's infusion into the spheres of Atzilus. That's the lower Havaya. But even higher than that, we're soon going to see. Even if you trace that Havaya higher and higher and higher into the light of the Kav, through the levels of Keser, and then into the lights of the Kav, all the way into the Orein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum, and you'll get to the 10 spheres Hagnuzais, to the 10 spheres that are hidden in the Orein Sof. That too is part of the lower Havaya. What's the Havaya D'Liela? From the ultimate perspective of what he's revealing to us over here in the Maamor, the true meaning of Havaya D'Liela is the Orein Sof that doesn't have any shaychus to the worlds, no connection to the worlds at all. It's above Seder Ishtalshalos. It's above the evolution of worlds, at the quintessential beginning of beginning, where God is shining within Himself, for Himself, not even thinking of worlds. Above it all. And then the light is in its pure simplicity, and that's the real meaning of Havaya D'Liela, the higher Havaya. So the Yedua is known. The Hainu Havaya, the Seder Ishtalshalos, the Havaya of the order of evolution. That's one Havaya. That's the lower Havaya. V'shalamaylam is Seder Ishtalshalos, and then there is the Havaya that is above Seder Ishtalshalos, above the whole evolution. Meaning, what does evolution mean? Chain-like progression is God contracting Himself to the creation. So again, the moment He wants creation, He desires it. The moment it arouses in His will to create, at that moment there is already a contraction. There's already an adjustment. The 10 spheres Hagnuzais appear. The hidden 10 spheres appear. Oh, that's already the lower Havaya. But the higher Havaya is the Orein Sof as it stands for itself. The Shem Havaya, and he says, take a look. The two names of Havaya actually mean two different things, even though it's the same word. The Alter Rebbe says that Havaya means Meloshin Mahave. Mahave means He brings into being. So that's the lower Shem Havaya, because He's called Havaya because He is the source for all beingness. He beings the beingness of the world. He's the being of the beingness of all of existence. He bees the bees and everything. If something exists, it's because it is into beingness. And God is the force that beings everything into beingness. That's why He's called Mahava. That's the word Havaya. Meloshin Mahava. But that's the lower Havaya. But then there is a deeper word in Havaya. Havaya means just that he is. Not Havaya that he is the source of all existence, but that he is the quintessence of existence itself. Not that he is existing other things into existence. In other words, there could be Havaya Maloshan Mehaveh, that he is Mahaveh something, or Havaya, he is the is, just the is for himself. That's Havaya Daliela, that's the higher Havaya. Shem Havaya, to say the Rishtal Shalus, the Shem Havaya of the order, progression of the order, Huloshan Mahaveh, he brings into being. V'hainu Shumakar HaMahaveh, he's the source that brings into being all of existence. V'hu, and this refers to Ha'or, the illumination, the light, V'hagiloi the Or Ein Sof, and the revelation of the Or Ein Sof. The revelation to who? Not the revelation for himself, to himself, but the revelation to reveal himself to the creation, to the universes, to all of existence. Shazau Makar Asavas. He's the source of bringing into beingness. V'zau Kamoshen is Baal El Perek Ches. He says in the parentheses over here, like we said, chapter 8, the Hishavis Bepoil, that the literal bringing into being, how did God bring the creation into beingness? The power, the fuse, the power, Hashem extends a power line. What's the power line? That's the Kav. The Kav is the power line, that's the plug, that's the electricity that runs through all of existence to power it. It's all the Kav, it's that thread. So that is a power line to the creation. And that's what's Mahava. So that's the lower Havaya. Hu al Yedei HaKav is through the Kav. Now, if we want to, all we can say, that the emphasis is not so much on the Mahava, Havaya, that the one who's bringing into being, that we're not looking so much at the stream, at the electricity that's flowing, if you might say, at the energy that's flowing, but the real power of Mahava is the source of this energy. Again, you don't want, he wants to say deeper. Maybe it's not the energy flow itself that's the Mahava, because Havaya is referring to God himself. But it's the quality that the light has, that the light is always attached to source. One of the things about light that we said earlier, that light reflects the source. And so the only one who can really beingness into existence, the only one who creates something from nothing is only Hashem himself. But the light is the one who literally does it. The energy coming from God is what actualizes that power, and the energy has the power to do that because the light is davuk to its source, and it's me'ein ha'ma'or, and it's like it reflects its ma'or. Its light reflects, the illumination is a reflection of the illuminator. So, again, the difference between his first. This is a very, very slight, I was having a hard time actually for 2 days trying to figure out what he wants over here in the second nuance. In his small little parentheses, he says two possibilities. Again, he's explaining the lower part of Havaya, the lower Havaya. Havaya, where God is called Havaya because he's bringing into being the world. However, the question is, to what are we attributing that? Either we're attributing it to the Kav itself, because the Kav is the force that of energy that flows from him to create the world. That's the Kav. Or we're attributing it not to the Kav. The Kav itself doesn't have power. The Kav is bringing the power of the source into actualization. So we're attributing the Havaya to the source. But the source is being revealed through the light. Or all we can say, like it says in Ageres HaKodesh in one of the letters in Tanya, in the back, in one of the portals of Tanya, not the portals, in one of the letters, the Alter Rebbe in the back of Tanya has printed a bunch of letters the Alter Rebbe wrote. Oh, they call it a pistil. That's the fancy word for it. That's what I was looking for. In any case, over there he says that the light is similar to the luminary. But the bottom line is whether it's the light reflecting the luminary, or you want to attribute the power to the light itself, the main point is it's an energy directed already to creation. It's about creating, and he's called Havaya because of the creation that he creates. That's why he's called Havaya. But that's a lower name, Havaya. The higher Havaya is not because of what he creates, but because of who he is for himself. And that is the Havaya de L'Yela. It's not for the sake of creation. Now, in the Maamor in Torah Or, in the book of Vasisa Tzitz, you should make a plate, a head plate for the high priest, connecting again to Hanukkah, because the high priest has a head plate where it was inscribed the words Kodesh Lashem. So in that Maamor, on those words, over there it explains how both Havaya, are both in the level of will. The Alter Rebbe explains they're both in the level of Ratzon. The lower Havaya is the actual Ratzon to create, the will to create, and the higher Havaya is the will from where that will comes from. It's called in Kabbalistic terminology or in Zoharic terminology, it's called Raiva de Kol Raiven, the will of all wills. So the lower will is already a will to create. That's the lower Havaya. And the higher Havaya is the source from where that will comes from. The fact that you have a will, it's because you're able to will. So that's still, it's the infinite pool from where every will come forth. So it's not yet a particular will. It's the power for him to will something. And then there is the will. So now we understand the difference. The lower Havaya, the essence, again, if we trace this all the way back to the again, what he's explaining over here can be seen later on in Seder Ishtalshalus. Where the Alter Rebbe is talking, he's talking further down. He's talking about there are the 10 spheres, the 10 attributes. The 10 attributes are the manifestation of each sphera in its own level. But then there is the level of Keter. Keter is the crown, which crown is usually associated with will. But in crown itself, there is the lower crown and the higher crown, which means the external part of the crown and the internal part of the crown. The external part of the crown is will, and the internal part of the crown is the will of all wills, from where all will comes from. Not the expressed will. But that's in Seder, that's already it's already after the Tzimtzum. But what he's doing over here in the Maamor is if you trace this idea back all the way to the pre-Tzimtzum, all the way in the Or Ein Sof, it's the same idea. Within the Or Ein Sof, when God is already willing that he should make a Tzimtzum and create a world, that's already the lower level will. That's already a particular will. And that's why automatically it forms 10 spheres. The 10 spheres, the hidden 10 spheres. And then there is the prior to that, the will of all wills, which is the higher Havaya, which is the Or Ein Sof, before it's even wanting to create worlds. It's the same idea. Okay. So over there he explains the Beis Hashemes Havaya, the two names of Havaya, Hem B'chenes HaRatzon, or both of them are in Ratzon. Both of them are in desire. Havaya HaBeis, the second Havaya, he explains, Hu Ke'inyan Havaya Moira, Shu Mahava Kol Havayas. The second Havaya is, Havaya means, as we said earlier, according to the lower interpretation, is that he brings all beings, he's being the beings, he bees the beings, okay? Maayon Layesh, from nothing to something. How does he do that? Through his will. But so this is referring to the primal will from where he wants to create worlds. So in that will is already included all the worlds that he will later create. It's all in the will. And unlike by us, when we want something, nothing is created. When we want something, we're maybe preparing the energies in our mind in a very hidden way, subconsciously. We're preparing the energies to eventually produce, but it doesn't get produced just because we want. But by God, the fact that as soon as he wants, the energies are already there and everything is already produced, but on a very high level, in a level of will. It's almost like all of creation is already there in the level of will. Through this that he desired it. That's the lower Havaya, is the will to make all beings. So in a sense, in that it's the Keter. It's what we would call sometimes Erech Anpin, the long face, which is the Keser that includes all 10 spheres. It's the part of Keser that includes all 10 spheres because he wants the 10 spheres. And as he wants the 10 spheres are already produced, hidden inside of him. But then there is a source higher than this. What's the first Havaya? There is a subconscious state. Before he has a revealed will, it's why did you want that will? So there is a source, that he should arouse so in his thought. And that level is called V'hu Havaya Echad, and that's the first Havaya, and that's called Raiva de Kol Raiven, the will of all wills. It's that you are a living being. For example, in a person, it's that you are alive. And because you're alive, and you have energy, you have a force, you have a life force. First of all, there is your essence. The essence is undefined by anything. Then there is that you are that your essence is a force. That force is a force of life. Can you define that life? Well, the life didn't express itself in anything. But that's called the will of all wills. You want to live, you want to make a difference, you want to project, you want to drive. It's the drive of all drives. In other words, just if there would only be essence and the essence would not come out, then you would just be a non, even though you would exist, we would exist in a non-expressed, non-impactful, non-present being. It would be like an invisible, unknown non-entity. So the first thing is the consciousness that you're a being and you have a force, you have drive. That's the first force of life that's coming out from, but that has no design yet. And that might be all the possibility, but the fact that you're alive, you're turned on to life. Okay, now what do I want to do with my life? Then I have an idea. I'm not talking about an intellectual idea. I have a desire. Once you have desire, that's already for a project. You realize that's already an enormous narrowing down of the energy. Narrowing it down, but getting much closer to impact on the world. But yet it's already narrowing that energy. So the second Havaya is when Hashem is already narrowing his energy to something. But first there has to be the will to drive will. The will to want. Because if you're sleeping and you're not, and that will is not on, the switch is not on, there will never be a will. So, see, again, the first primal will is not the essence, but it's the first expression of the essence. I'm alive. That's Orein Sof before it becomes, I want a world. And then comes, I want a world. So these are the two levels of Ratzon, two levels of will as they move forward. Havaya, as we shall continue explaining Be'ezus Hashem tomorrow in the next class. Meanwhile, let Mashiach be here today.